What does it mean to be genuine? Say you struggled to express feelings directly to someone you wanted to be genuine with, and so you can just come out and tell them how you felt. But you can kind of do it through a few jokes here and there, or acts of service, or other means which are or seem non-direct to compensate for that. Are those genuine from the intent behind them, or not so because they are not typically what we'd call a straightforward act of care? It's kind of like utilitarianism versus deontology. Is it the intent behind it or the action itself that actually matters? I think in the age of responding to almost everything with memes or humor, coming from an age where most acts that were genuine were called cringe, this is a question worth asking. What is being genuine? Can an act become a genuine part of us, and how will these methods impact our futures together? Luckily for us, a show you've probably seen has essentially asked and presented a case on all of this. I really don't need to craft an introduction to Steins Gate, so I'll be brief, but just in case, the 2011 anime follows Okabe Rintaro, an 18-year-old self-proclaimed mad scientist who goes by Hououin Kyouma and heads the Future Gadget Laboratory, where he and his chronically otaku friend Daru show, at the very least, engineering skill by mixing together bits of technology, like a microwave you can activate from your phone, even if they aren't quite physicists. They're also joined by Mayuri Shiina, Okabe's childhood friend whose upbeat personality contrasts against the mad scientist and H-game obsessive, working on handcrafting cosplays as they tinker. And well, that's most of it. They live out their lives primarily within this small bubble away from the worries of adulthood. For half the series, the conflict is just daily life. There is no villain. Well, that isn't until it turns out the Phonewave is actually a time machine that allows data and so text to be sent backwards in time, leading to a shifting of timelines that sets the world on a course for tyrannical rule by a corrupted CERN, but we'll get to that. In the daily life we see before things go completely awry, there is an annoying character developing in Okabe, or rather in Kyouma, the name of his mad scientist persona. No matter where or when they are, he's playing this outrageous role, from interrupting scientific conferences with outbursts to speaking into a phone that's not turned on about organization plots, which he'll do even in shops that don't allow talking on the phone and continue doing after the owner points this out, and since he's not even actually talking to anyone, he's being rude for an entirely made-up one-person conversation. With no regard for how he or his friends are seen, he dives into this self-obsessive I am the main character, only I can stop the secret end of the world persona in a way that can't be ignored. This seems a little bit selfish, especially when you consider that his friends are often the ones supporting him. Mayuri is the one of the trio who works waiting tables at a local maid cafe run by their friend Faris, a queen of Akihabara's moe culture. Whether it's using her food for experiments or taking in the donations they get from her friends, the Future Gadget Lab would be going hungry without her. And Daru is the one who seemed to do most of that technical work, building the actual devices even if they're mostly pointless, while Okabe rants about the chaos they'll unleash on the world from them. From hacking into CERN to fixing a completely foreign time machine in just a couple nights, his skills are invaluable to what Okabe does. Without these two, well, he's nothing, yet he's the one acting as the main character. And there's even more. Their later development of their own time machine is mostly done by Makise Kurisu, a published physicist at the age of 18, who brings the heavy scientific knowledge required, as well as a heavy dose of tsundere. Without her, all they could do was keep turning bananas into green mush, and she apprehensively joins their lab after a rough start with Okabe to uncover the science behind this. But you can't entirely blame him for that rough start. He did think he saw her dead in a pool of blood, but then found her alive soon after, which will mess with your mind a bit. But there's also how Kyouma treats Faris and Ruka, a friend of theirs whose family runs a local shrine, as pupils of sorts, having them somewhat bend to his whims when he's around. Faris drops everything at work to greet him, much to Daru's annoyance, and the same goes for Ruka as he asks them how their special techniques are coming for his grand ambitions to stop the organization's schemes. Once again, we see clearly who the main character is, the one who has to be special. He skips out on bills and insults the people who accomplish his work. If you're just a neighbor or someone passing by, you'd hate this immature child who never grew up. And we see that with his landlord, Tenoji Yugo, better known to the group as Mr. Braun, who's constantly dealing with his antics above his shop and wondering when it's going to even affect his daughter's safety. To a normal person in this world, an outside of their group observer, the only good thing about Okabe is his rent check. But we aren't normal people in their world. We are an audience with deeper insights into these characters' minds. Well, everything here may read as a selfish attempt for a small man to make himself feel large, disingenuous babbling from someone with nothing to offer. Why does he have the friends he has? There must be something within this which is actually positive then, right? And of course there is. Despite looking like a slapdash mess, what if we saw that this whole mad scientist act was not at all for himself, but actually a very genuine act of care for his friends? To make things clear from the start of this deeper analysis, there are a few points in the anime where Okabe himself directly says that Kyouma is an act he puts on.
I'm not an evil genius! Hououin Kyouma? Who gives a damn about him? He's fiction!
In these moments where he's pushed to his limits, the facade drops to show a man who's actually annoyed by it, in some anguish that he has to try and keep it up. It's less enjoyment and more of almost a duty, you could say? So why does he do it? Well, the base explanation is found in his past with Mayuri, his longest friend. As the story progresses, the focus shifts from daily life to saving her due to the butterfly effect. Okabe and Kurisu discover their new time machine and how it works, which allows their friends to test it by sending personal texts back in time, known as D-mails, to change their present. At first, this leads to seemingly inconsequential changes to the world, like they simply didn't meet one new friend or one person's sex was changed, although some end up changing a whole lot, like turning Akihabara from Otaku Central to just another boring part of Tokyo, altering thousands of lives. This begs the question, what else has changed that they just haven't noticed yet? And it turns out that is Mayuri's fate. Now, a quick overview of Steins Gate time rules. Each timeline is called a world line, which are clustered into attractor fields, designated by the first digit on the divergence meter here. In these gatherings of numbers under that digit or within that digit, certain events always occur. For example, under 1, Mayuri's death is a fated occurrence. No matter what is done, it will happen. The most common occurrence of it is that when Okabe, Kurisu, and Daru are captured by CERN, she's disposed of, and their Phonewave turns into the prototype for CERN's tyrannical control. No matter what Okabe tries, time and time again, he can't prevent her death because this cluster of timelines decrees it must happen. So to prevent it, they have to reach a cluster of world lines above the number 1 where that doesn't occur. Also, Okabe is the only one to maintain memories across world lines. Everyone else forgets. Kind of, but more on that later. But this need to change attractor fields to save Mayuri draws him out of the Kyouma act for most of the second half of the anime, as he tries to undo all the changes they made to time and reach a value above 1, and so he speaks a lot more honestly in timelines that no one will remember, including about he and Mayuri's past. Mayuri was close with her grandmother, and so when she passed, the young girl was left distraught. She'd stand by her grave all day, never moving from the spot whether it was rain or shine, while Okabe watched from the sidelines. One day she began to reach for the sky standing there, which he seemingly correctly understood as a sign of her giving up, if you will. Afraid that he'll lose his only real friend, he rushes in to prevent her from leaving with the first excuse he could come up with.
You're my hostage, do you hear me? You can't escape a mad scientist, so don't even bother trying!
This explains the logical basis to what he does. Mayuri was ready to leave, and he didn't know how to stop her from doing so. It's a complex issue that's hard to recognize and harder to prevent. But she can't leave if she's not allowed. This solves the physicality of the issue that was being faced in a quick and effective way. By putting on this act, by creating an excuse for her not to be able to undertake this harmful action, Okabe is able to help Mayuri when she needs it most. And this success, as well as the need to keep up the act for the excuse to stay, leads him down a path he probably could have never imagined with Kyouma. As we detail this path, though, we have to correct the mistakes of our observational position. From the sidelines, what we criticize Kyouma for might seem accurate, but what about when we look more directly and understand why his friends accept the act he puts on and how it even benefits them? While its origination with Mayuri was a pretty simple utility, it evolves to be a bit more complex of an excuse with his other and newer friends. First of all, we said it was as if he was playing to be special, but given he doesn't actually enjoy it, this is actually for the sake of making others feel special and valuable, not himself. We could point to every character somewhere to show this, which I'd encourage you to consider as well because I couldn't fit it all in here, but the best example is definitely Ruka. Working at their family shrine, their duties in life are mostly spiritual. Okabe takes this and extends it into things like giving them a cheap sword he found at a pawn shop which definitely has a curse on it and tells them they need to practice how to properly use it. He's exaggerated their role for emphasis. Of course, this takes up their time and energy and doesn't really lead to any specific benefits as they're literally practicing for a skill for something that Okabe just made up out of thin air. But it's also an excuse for him to provide them praise in any situation and with no contrary evidence. Whenever he goes to the shrine, he can mention how their techniques are really improving from how hard they're working at it, and no one else can say otherwise because only he even knows what the technique is. Even if they're going nowhere, they can be made to feel like they are, and that positive boost then actually will lead them somewhere. It's like when he stops by, they get a little boost to how they feel that day guaranteed. Maybe something went wrong earlier, but something always goes right when Okabe stops by. He even extends this further into exorcisms when he puts his own discomfort into the ring for the same sake. When Rukiko begins to doubt their abilities, he suddenly has an outburst of pain. He's been possessed by a demon. She needs to exorcise it, and she needs to right now, definitely 100% legitimately for his sake. He's throwing a fake physical fit complete with mad yells for help, making himself look insane to anyone else, all for the sake of trying to give someone evidence of their value, using the persona of Kyouma as an undeniable excuse that they are special and valuable to someone else. There's also belonging in Kyouma. Now, the way I wrote that appropriately set off every single grammar check, but it's exactly what I mean. Within the character of Kyouma, other people can easily find belonging. This comes down to a game of perspective. All of Okabe's friends are weird in their own ways. Mayuri reaches for stars, often dropping what she's doing to put her hand up to the sky. Daru, well, he's Daru, I can't mention his oddities if I want this video to be visible. Kurisu seems normal on the outside, but for the sake of science, she'll eat a banana that's been turned into a mysterious goo and has a secret internet culture side. Faris is the Moe queen, working meow into her regular speech even well off the clock from Queen Maze. Rukiko doesn't conform to traditional gender standards, and Moeka, a lab member we haven't mentioned before now, is someone Okabe met because she was taking random pictures of the street to remember her present, and she can hardly speak to another human face to face. And Suzuha, another new mention, is the walking embodiment of, is this what the kids say these days? Because, well, she's actually a time traveler who came back to prevent CERN's takeover, but that'll come in time. These are all people who lie outside of the norm in distinct, obvious ways, but not as obvious as a mad scientist. Kyouma is actually somewhat taking the heat off the people around him as the judgment is lumped onto him instead. We see this pretty directly as Daru apologizes for him in public, and making someone called pervert in an actually meaningful way seem like the reasonable person in the room. When you're standing next to a mad scientist, suddenly cat ears or skimpy cosplay don't seem so weird. This is probably something you didn't even really notice that much while watching the show. They're all weird enough people that they'd probably be talked about behind their backs, but Okabe takes so much of that focus that the others actually don't really seem to reach that same level of complete oddity that he does. But it's also about inhibition. It's very hard to be the first person to do something, which means it's difficult to do anything abnormal, anything you're not seeing performed by other people every day. Being the only one to dress against their gender or live in Moe culture isn't something that's easy to take the first step at. And so sometimes we won't be our genuine selves because of that, and this is a true detriment to your quality of life. But when Kyouma is out there flying the freak flag first, it gets a lot easier. Suddenly someone else is doing a weird thing before you could even take a second to wonder about doing one yourself, like it was damn near instinctual to him. So would it really be wrong for you to do whatever you thought would maybe get a few weird looks? By living in this unabashed way, he's setting an example that it's fine to get judgmental looks about being yourself. They shouldn't stop you as they don't stop him. And he's also allowing them to be more genuine to who they are in that. Being the oddest of the bunch makes it so much easier for the people around him to not have to stand out, but without ever having to compromise on who they are just the same. He provides them with the sweet spot of attention, not just from himself, but from society too. And speaking about the oddities of this group of people, they're a somewhat disparate gathering. There's some overlap, like Daru's into anime of course, but in a more, well, specific way. Faris is of course going to be popular with anime fans, but she's also into different games that someone like Daru only plays to be around her. Mayuri is all about cosplay, which is tangential, but something she does with other people who are more specifically into that than, say, Ruka, who she can convince to get into cosplay, but they only actually do it to make her happy. Maybe Kurisu would, but she's a closeted nerd, engaging in fandoms only behind a screen and out of sight. And then Okabe is a nerd, but in the former sense, into science and technology, not into the new sense of internet culture. And then Moeka and Suzuha don't really have any overlap with the other lad members at all. One of them can't communicate and the other literally comes from a different world. And yet, all of these people end up special within the hearts of the others. The way most relationships are formed once you enter adulthood, the exact point most of these characters are at, is through common interest. No longer forced to be around others in school, you're instead made to rely on meeting people at work or through some kind of hobby for the most part. Whether that's cosplay, Rhinet, or scientific conferences, but there's usually some sort of common activity, common thread running throughout. Here, there really isn't. The only through line is Okabe, or maybe rather Kyouma. His evil scientist persona is someone mad enough to basically invent a hobby for these people to gather around, to almost become the hobby for these people. They all have a special duty to him in the lab, whether that's being a loyal hack, which is what he calls hacker for some reason, or a diligent assistant. These are vague roles that denote responsibility, but without actually bothering them with it and only making them do things they want to do. He creates a central pillar of just enough responsibility that they'll come back to each other again and again, but never enough that's actually really annoying in any way. They have those duties as lab members and they'll be expected to make meetings, but the actuality of those duties is most often preparing for parties, and the meetings are, well, the parties. Most of what we see them in lab is celebration. There's a new lab member, let's get everyone together and celebrate, or someone just had a major event, let's get together to celebrate if it was good or console if it wasn't, but either way, throwing a party. Kyouma reintroduces that bit of solidity, both responsibility and commonality, that people with nothing in common on the surface use to develop deeper relationships. It's an excuse for people to be around each other without that fear of, well, maybe I'm just being a bother, or maybe I don't know them well enough to hang out with them. Because this madman is shouting the excuse at your face, there's no room to doubt. Plus, he kind of is the common interest. Conversation would be easy with someone you didn't know if you had this person to talk about, at least to break the ice. It's like poking fun at a mutual friend when they leave the room to keep the conversation going with new people. There's even more you can dig out of the series, but what this all boils down to is that Kyouma is an excuse to be genuine with his friends, to truly care for and help them based on his love for them. And the way this is accomplished is entirely dependent upon the whims of a mad scientist. Throughout the anime, Kyouma uses this as an excuse for everything they need. Kurisu needs to patch things up with her father because a mad scientist assistant can't allow her focus to sway onto other, less important things than the fate of the world. And Suzuha can't travel back in time without having met her father because the will of a mad scientist says it can't be. That will disrespects order itself, and what more maintenance of order is there than time? It is a challenge he must undertake. It is the very core of his being. His persona, that is his method of assistance, is chaos. And the thing about chaos is it's nonsense. It can be crafted into whatever is needed at that moment. And so Kyouma isn't just an excuse. He's any excuse. Whatever problem someone has, from Mayuri's loss to absent fathers, Kyouma will find a reason to have a way to fix it, even if that means messing with things beyond what he can truly control. The thing is, Okabe himself is actually quite considerate of science. Having just uncovered the ability to send data back in time, which anyone would use to outright win the lottery, he settles on taking a low price simply to test its efficacy, rather than getting rich. He's actually aware of the butterfly effect and wants to avoid it as best as possible, often thinking of it as he's about to send one of those D-mails that his friends requested. But the issue is that they're requesting its use to better their lives. Moeka uses it to achieve her tasks as a secret CERN agent, yes, which validates her from her handler's praise. Ruka seeks to change sexes to be appealing to Okabe, who she secretly loves, not so secretly sometimes. And Faris wants to prevent her father's death by altering his travel on the day he died. They don't outright express the entire truth of these desires to Okabe, but he knows they're using it for their benefit, and he is someone who desperately wants to help his friends. And so, despite worrying very greatly, very genuinely about its consequences, he pushes through each time with the reasoning that a mad scientist must pursue this goal. Kyouma is such a strong excuse for such a strong desire to help his friends that he'll risk throwing time itself into chaos for them. That bravado is just an excuse to care against all odds. It means the act has to be genuine, right? Or is it the excuse that's strong and not the care? Was this all what someone who truly cared would do, or is it the actions of a man who's simply covering for his own inability? Kyouma is there because connecting with the others, breaking through the AT fields if you will, is difficult. Being genuine with people is terrifying. How do you care for people, and how do you express that you do when everyone's different and when you're different? When is too soon and how much is too strong? And how do you meet someone new and how do you react to their intricacies and learn about their specifics, since they're someone new and then everyone is someone new because they're all unique, so it's like a double new situation. And then what words do you tell someone to use that you care about them? What words and actions make them feel better? Because again, there's no formula for it, there's no consistency almost. Each human, each connection is a complex puzzle which takes a lifetime to understand just one of, and at best is only ever solved in approximation, because we could never spend an entire lifetime just on one person. You know this. Most of us communicate almost entirely in humor or memes for some variation of this reason. We work in group speak, easily communicatable archetypes which cover expression. Okabe is the same, terrible at solving these puzzles called people. Take the initial moment with Mayuri, and keep in mind that this is all excusable because he was literally a child who didn't know any better. But what was Mayuri lacking in that loss of her grandmother? It was probably a bit of attention, familial affection, praise and care, the overall sense that someone finds her valuable no matter what. Nothing could replace that specific connection. No one just slots into that hole in the heart, but other people could show her that same kind of value. There was another way to show her that this tragic event didn't need to make her leave, and it was providing these things to her. It was being as direct as she could handle, saying that she was valuable and cared for and worth having around. It was being by her side directly, to express that warmth in the most understandable way, to literally feel it. But he wasn't by her side. He was off to the side, wondering how to fix the problem now, not how to solely provide evidence against it. The better path would have been reassurance, saying that he'll stay with her and that things could get better, that he'll help to try and make them better. But being genuine is full of those tough, fearful things that require a ton of attention and understanding on the part of the observer. That upfront cost to prevent future disaster is terrifying. The real task is long and difficult. Stunted by this fear, Okabe found an instantaneous excuse on that moment rather than the constant duty that care is. He solved the logistics of the issue, but he didn't understand or console the emotions, everything behind it. We can see that this is fear from his interactions with Kurisu during timelines that won't be remembered, as he's leaping back again and again to undo the demails which create this awful future and lead to Mayuri's death. Okabe is forced to have the same conversation with Kurisu again and again, explaining the situation to her more times than we could count. He's beaten and broken by this repetition, enduring a mental torment that's unimaginable as he watches his best friend die many times over. Okabe has been homorized. Now, part of what we're about to say is also due to this exhaustion one would find in that, his simply horrid mental state, but I think we can also say his genuinity with Kurisu in these times, that is, not being Kyouma with her, is because it won't be remembered by anyone but him. He can call her by her name for the first time, rather than calling her by the made-up Christina or simply assistant, which function as distractions. If he does something kind but annoys her with these names, she won't catch on that he actually cares, which is likely why he uses those names, to care without facing those new, tough situations that known caring brings. But when she won't remember, there's no need to keep up the act. He can admit he cares for her, even loves her, and it doesn't matter because it won't ever lead to that uncomfortable state. Breaking the barrier will have no consequences, no new situations to learn how to explore in this much deeper connection they now share. These new situations are genuine moments that follow from people knowing, without a doubt, that they are someone you love, not just someone you find fun or exciting for a little bit. Intimacy is great, but it does change things. It takes a dynamic which is comfortable, if sometimes anxious, but less deep, and in adding that depth introduces moments of responsibility and uncomfortability that are always new because, well, every single person is new and unique. There are deeper secrets and emotional conversations that take a lot more mental stamina than just joking around or playing games. It's a certain amount of obligation in moments of need. You lose those questions like, oh, I don't know, am I just bothering them? But you replace it with responsibility and the need to learn someone. Kyouma cares, but also keeps everything at arm's length, a comfortable distance, a plausible deniability, fixing logistics but offering little genuine support. And that's the greatest trick of Kyouma and why those benefits fade away. In the end, it's still a somewhat selfish, relatable selfishness born from a fear of genuinity. There's really only one reason why his excuse worked so well with Mayuri, and that's because she's actually emotionally mature well beyond her age and appearance. Despite seeming like the fragile flower of the group, if anyone has it together, it's Mayuri. We can see this in how she compliments Kyouma, filling in some of those gaps that a never-ending persona creates. Sure, he is the pillar they gather around, but she's the glue which actually holds the group together, the deeper feelings that make a hobby worthwhile. When the mad scientist brings them into the lab, ranting and raving, she's the one who gives them a tour of the admittedly small apartment, making every single feature feel like something of genuine note. Those are meaningless things, but every single one feels like it's worth a whole essay in how she shows it off. He's the hook, but she's the one actually reeling people in, calming things down a bit as if to say almost, he's crazy, but we mean well. Not to mention again that she's often the one providing food, the one who prevents people from fighting if things get heated, which can often occur because of Kyouma's ridiculousness, and even more, she was the second member right alongside Okabe. Without her, there never would have been a future gadget lab to begin with. From the very foundations of how Kyouma helps people, she's always been there and been a huge part of it. She is the true genuinity that he lacks, and without that, Kyouma is a failed experiment. Her follow-through is crucial to make his excuse worthwhile. So, since Mayuri was the one who made it work in her case, let's examine the others, the D-mails his friends send. Specifically for time though, because the script was originally 20 goddamn pages long, we'll zero in on Faris to be deep and specific without taking up your entire day. As we said, her text saved her father. When she was a child, she demanded her father make it home for her birthday like he said he would despite business calling, which led to him getting on an earlier flight, which crashed. Her text undid this by saying it was actually fine, she wouldn't mind if he got home later, which changes all of Akihabara because, as it turns out, her family basically owns it and he prevents her from turning it into a Moe Central. In this new timeline where he's back, we see that they have a very pure and strong connection. He's on the good spectrum of anime dads. What she desires is a father, but what comes from a father? What is the point of the connection she brought back? There's the warmth of a hug, attention for important moments, tender care on your worst days, very ideal things like that. This is what deep down she was reclaiming. As we said with Mayuri, there's no way to replace these things just as a friend, but one can prove through showing them that they do still exist. Stay by their side, compliment them when it feels right, support them with a laugh or a hug on a bad day. By ensuring they feel these things and the value of someone taking the time and care to express them, one can allow them to make peace with what's happened and be much more fulfilled and possibly happy. So why doesn't Kyouma work then? We said he was all about providing these benefits, outputting tons of constant effort to show these people they're valuable, special, and cared for. Well, Kyouma was only kind of doing that. It worked with Mayuri because of her emotional maturity. She could intuit these things from knowing Okabe for so long and a bit more deeply from that. She'd seen him standing off to the side for that long, known him before Kyouma was an excuse to communicate, and so she could see that what he was doing and the true care behind it, how much effort it all was. She even knows when he's acting up the act. But the others can't intuit so much from him. They've only known the act, and so Kyouma might provide these benefits for an instant, but they're not understood as a care which actually shows their value. They can never be certain how genuine he is. The mad scientist is a sort of shortcut. He jumpstarts a way to make them feel positively, but because it's all under a ridiculous arm's-length act, there's no follow-through that proves it in specific and direct words or actions. They're always left wondering deep down, always left with a desire to fix their present from this wonder. Humans are silly things full of doubt. We need those direct, exact moments to know. Kyouma never really solves the issue since it's a band-aid, an excuse, holding things together which will crumble if you stop. He never gives them that directness with a soft tone and gentle touch. Sure, being genuine upfront is difficult and more effort to start, but it rubs off in a sense. It becomes easier as it proves value in an understandable way, rather than the confusing mess Kyouma provides. It's something he has to maintain forever to provide those benefits, an unyielding task, and then, even then, it doesn't even fully accomplish the task. Of course he feels anguish from it. It's an awful excuse to carry forward with an ever-compounding difficulty with more special techniques and more specific banter and more mad ramblings to remember with each and every lab member always on watch to provide whatever they need. Basically, he's fishing with 8 rods at once instead of teaching them all how to use one. This all comes full circle when he has to undo the D-mails. You think it would be easy, just send a contradictory text like, actually no dad, get home right now still. But this can't be done so easily because he doesn't actually know what she sent. She wouldn't tell him. It's ironic. If they knew each other on a deep level, she may have told him this when she was sending it without embarrassment. But because he was slapping on a band-aid from a distance, they never had anything like a heart-to-heart where she would admit to something like this in the timeline they came from. The reason why he has to undertake this awful experience we're about to cover is specifically a result of trying to have the benefits of a deep connection without ever actually forming one. But effectively, what he has to do to undo these D-mails is what he was meant to do in the first place. Assist them through understanding and dedication. Now, I'm not saying that what he does are things we should reasonably expect any person to do. This is still an overly dramatic show at the end of the day. But at the core of his actions, there are those 2 important traits. To undo the D-mail that Faris sent, Okabe proves to her that she's worth fighting for by literally getting beat almost to death by some guys who were possibly trying to kill her long enough for her dad to find and save them. And having witnessed how much he truly cares from this undeniable act, and recovering some memories from their original timeline because everyone sort of has that ability deep down, Faris then feels comfortable sharing with Okabe the text she sent, the one which prevented her father's death. She was just a little girl who couldn't have predicted that wanting attention from her father would lead to something so awful. It's a genuine, invulnerable admission that we never see her even think of saying to anyone else, and she says it to Okabe because he did that same thing for her, that same kind of thing. There was no Kyouma, no safe distance. There was only his desperate vulnerability drawn out in his quest to save his longest friend, a time when he has no capacity to keep up the act and no ability to fear being genuine, and so he simply is. After his actions, ones which without a doubt express a care for her even beyond words, they truly connected for the first time. Witnessing this from her as well, and opening up about the situation, plus how much Mayuri means to him, he's able to convince her to undo her texts and send them closer to Mayuri's survival. By understanding her, as they share the same base feelings for these people, he was able to make the positive change he sought. He was able to convince her that what she desired from her text would be able to exist in another world enough to give it up here. This is what he needed to do all along, only done now in a desperation so great he has to, and in a timeline which will never be remembered to break past his fears. Eventually, after undoing others from Ruka and Moeka, this leads back to Kurisu, as the first email Okabe accidentally sent about her death was actually what changed the world enough to save her from ever dying to begin with. But it's not far back enough to change attractor fields and keep Mayuri from dying. This means he has to decide if he wants a world with his oldest friend or his newest love, as Kurisu's obvious "it's not like I like you" or anything signs turned into mutual affection. Okabe agonizes over the decision, and if it was up to him, he'd probably never decide, just reliving the same couple days with them both again and again until he went truly mad. But what fixes the situation is his ability to be genuine in this desperate, unremembered timeline. While he's agonizing, he and Kurisu grow rather close. He admits Kyouma is an act. She sews up his lab coat where it rips, and they even share a kiss in the lab as each uncovers their feelings now that Kyouma isn't in the way, now that there's no reason not to be genuine in this doomed timeline. And in this deeper connection brought out from a forced overcoming of fear, Kurisu uncovers some memories of the other timelines just like Faris and the others did. Maybe it's because of him, maybe his genuine actions when Kyouma is dropped to draw forward these memories, an almost cheesy level of love conquering all by stating that connection is so strong it binds time to its will. Whatever the case, Kurisu feels the love that's been leading him down these repetitious timelines, all the agony he endured dedicating himself to saving someone he loves. It's him being truly genuine, and the only way she can respect that, and the side of him that she's grown to love, which she only knows because of that quest, is to give herself up so he can accomplish that quest. Just like with Faris, only by expressing clearly to her what he felt was the future he sought reached. And so she chooses for him. She leaves after their kiss and tells him to save Mayuri, and he undoes the first text. The world line changes. They ship off the computer used to hack and discern and discard time travel forever, saving the world with no one but him knowing any of this ever happened. Upon finally escaping from this repetitious hell, an overwhelmed Okabe expresses his feelings in the only way he knows how: Kyouma. He begins to shout about overcoming the organization's schemes and the greatness of his mad science, but Mayuri says to him,
"Just be yourself. You don't have to pretend to be Hououin Kyouma for me. You can cry now if you want. Go ahead."
just as he was putting on the most bombastic Kyouma act ever. They share a look and he stops, and it seems we reach a conclusion. The act seemed positive, it was simply a front, brewing a much harsher future under its shortcut solutions. He doesn't have to act anymore, said directly. They share that kind of soft look that we've been saying is so important. We must be fully genuine to avert this kind of disaster. And the credits roll. And I guess that's it. An unsatisfactory end due to an unsatisfactory act. Except the story isn't over. This sad, coping Okabe would be a shitty answer to our question, which disrespects just how tough our barriers can be and would leave us with only, well, try harder as a solution. We can already see cracks in this idea from earlier episodes. When Okabe was at his worst, when Mayuri had recently just started dying, Kurisu actually uses his typical Kyouma stance and style to motivate him to keep going, even as time seemed undefeatable, and in the collaboration gained from this, he found the answer which led him to save Mayuri, a definitive statement that the togetherness formed from true care is best, but that reaching that state quicker through an act was also crucial. And this is the trick. It is a shortcut. It sped things ahead to the point where she could be genuine with him by breaking the ice of that situation, shocking his system a bit, and then it was followed up with that soft look and the hands touching and the knowledge that she cared for him, which didn't just give a moment of motivation, but proved he was worth continuing that motivation. A little bit of Kyouma was used in the right way was what helped save the day. He's not inherently unhealthy, he's just not for every single situation. Further, the way he undoes Rukako's text is by going on a date with them, which they requested in exchange for the pager number used to contact their mother and change their sex. He and Kurisu spend the day prepping for it with new clothes, picking where to go, reading books on being a gentleman, and despite following it all, even with some hiccups, Rukako is disappointed at the end of the night, giving him the pager number he needs, but running off crying. Although Okabe is about to use it to undo their text, he realizes the problem. Rukako wanted a date with Kyouma. She actually really enjoys aspects of the mad scientist and the benefits he provides. They truly did feel special from his whole training shtick and enjoyed how his boldness complemented their reservedness, how he could spit facts they'd listen to in amazement all day. So he rushes back and treats them like he would his Kyouma, and they practice their demon sword training all night, and that is the effective version of the date. Some people actually want this more than Okabe. Kyouma isn't just an annoying excuse, it's a part of Okabe that some enjoy, and this is another look at how it should be used in some cases but not all. Each person is unique, and what they need and want will differ. Some will react better to those shortcut versions of the benefits, and some the deeper ones. There is no one-size-fits-all shortcut, there's only a case-by-case basis. Kyouma can be good with this considered, as he was truly positive for Rukako. But the true proof begins in the end credits of episode 22, when Suzuha returns from a different future, one where World War III breaks out due to a new kind of arms race, who can build the first time machine. Turns out Kurisu's father is Dr. Nakabachi, the kind of mad guy obsessed with time travel, so she writes a paper about time travel to try and get in his good fortune, which he then steals from her, seemingly kills her, defects to Russia, and that leads to the whole time machine arms race thing. The only way to prevent it is to reach one specific world line in this attractive field where the paper is destroyed and Kurisu survives. Okabe has to ride once more to prevent total disaster, which he agrees to do only because he wants to save the person he loves. He gets in the time machine and they go back, Okabe and Suzuha, to save Kurisu, replaying the first episode of the anime from a new perspective. We find out the reason why he finds her lying dead in a puddle of blood after hearing a scream that was kind of similar. Okabe killed her. In trying to save her from her abusive father, Okabe accidentally stabs Kurisu himself, perfectly matching the occurrences from episode 1. They fail and return to the future to recoup, but a broken, bloodstained Okabe, babbling, "I killed Kurisu" over and over again, refuses. He's done this song and dance before with Mayuri, trying again and again to find an ideal future. He knows it's only a shortcut, a torture which doesn't work towards anything truly good. He won't go back. He won't try again, billions of people dead in World War III or not. And that's fine, actually, that Okabe won't go back, because he isn't the one who was needed to save the day. Kyouma was. As it turns out, that failure was part of the plan to get him primed for what follows. Mayuri slaps some sense into him, literally, revealing one important moment where her emotional maturity gives way to an outburst. Sometimes people being able to see what they mean so much we lose our composure can mean a lot too. We don't have to be absolutely mature in every situation. Another point for Kyouma. Suzuha follows this up by admitting that it was all a plan and says he should be able to finally see a video file he received weeks earlier in the first episode that appeared to just be static. The video, a grainy mess that shows only the speaker's back, is future Okabe speaking to himself, telling him that he has to see this through. But it's a somewhat foreign Okabe, He talks about satisfying their whimsy with meaningless operation names, a staple of Kyouma, but this is just after admitting that those names have utterly no point or reason. He's calm, but with all the dramatic phrasing that we've come to know from Kyouma, and when he breaks his character, he's not distraught like present Okabe always is. He's comfortable both being Kyouma and Okabe throughout this speech to himself, changing between statements, whichever's best for it, using him where it's best. What we see feels like a more mature Kyouma, one who's using the aesthetics of the mad scientist, but with a real purpose and a true goal behind it, rather than just nonsense thrown at the wall. What he's saying to himself without saying it is that Okabe needs to use Kyouma to get through this, and what follows is proof of that. He laughs about how so many years in the future he never grows out of this childish act, never matures, but then he jumps back into the persona anyway, throwing himself forward with vigor after just experiencing one of the worst moments of an already awful series of weeks fraught with mental torture. To the amazement of the others, he reaches his most dramatic yet, but with real meaning behind his words and a true purpose to his actions. He's not just ranting because he doesn't know how to speak to them, he's ranting in service of a goal he truly wants to see accomplished. He has one go to save the person he loves and the world. He has to motivate himself to make it work no matter what, and what better way than Kyouma, using all that drama for himself. Bouncing from nothing back to everything, we see how much Kyouma meant to Okabe actually. He was motivating himself this entire time. And if you've seen Steins Gate Zero, you know how true that really is. Kyouma also becomes how he solves this situation just the same. The plan they execute is to make past Okabe think he's seeing a dead Kurisu, but to actually leave her alive, playing around the occurrence that's faded. To maintain this attractor field, she doesn't actually have to die, Okabe simply has to think she does so he can send that text. So they return with fake blood. Okabe will fend off her father, knock her out, and spill the fake blood to trick himself in the past. Simple enough. Only problem, when they arrive, it turns out the source of the fake blood is dried up. Having to think on his feet, Okabe jumps into Kyouma, the most aggressive we've ever seen it used, this time to directly annoy someone as he antagonizes her father, hoping for a brutal outcome. He pushes him far enough, and the real madman stabs the fake one, providing the blood. Okabe then uses the opportunity to scare him off with a threat of retribution, a feat of enduring strength for him to maintain with such a wound. Only through Kyouma can he fake this kind of strength. And after Nakabachi flees, Okabe knocks out Kurisu and proves this strength even further by drawing more blood to ensure he convinces himself, waits for confirmation that he did before they leave despite his ever-flowing wound, and he and Suzuha travel forwards in time to a future which should be clear from any awful fates, a timeline named by his future self as Steins Gate, the 1 in 1 million chance for things to work out. And it's accomplished by the truly brilliant mind of Okabe with the outrageous persona of Kyouma putting it into the world. He tried twice, and the one which succeeds is the one which takes the best of both worlds, using each where they would be more appropriate. Kyouma does what he does best, drawing attention and pushing forward with vigor against all odds, for that's what a mad scientist does. But he only does so after the careful contemplation of Okabe this time, rather than running around at random. It's a compromise between the two, an excuse used when it's best to be used. Kyouma can't solve every situation, we saw that very clearly, but he can be a means to move a situation forward to a point where it's better addressed. He can be brought out for a moment to provide those benefits he does, but then reinforced by an Okabe who's willing to back them up with genuinity after the fact. This is seen pretty clearly in the final moments of the anime. After getting out of the hospital, he wanders around finding all the lab members who never were since time was reversed, and gives them pins designating a member number. It's a gesture of Kyouma since it's pretty random and whimsical, but with dedication behind it. He's not just pulling some words out of thin air, he had to go and have these made and take time and energy and money to make them a meaningful and unique gift for each one, even if he presents it as a past ender his mad laboratory. It's something which is more definitively done with care, a physical reminder of the time and attention, and expresses love, using Kyouma only as an excuse to break down the toughest barriers we find on the outside, before tenderly approaching with what lies within. He's much more like future Okabe when he speaks with them, still given to whimsical phrasing, but much more calm and collected. It even mirrors the way that future Okabe is presented, not really showing his eyes whenever these people are speaking about him. He is literally presented in the same way as his future, more confident, more synthesized self. And when they speak about this all, each member describes him as a much more meaningful person than before, almost respecting him this go around. His careful dedication is showing through this time, making Kyouma truly useful. And as he's passing out these pins, he meets Kurisu by nothing more than chance as they pass on the street. Remembering that he saved her from her father by getting stabbed, of course she wants to say thank you, but what she sees is a man who's speaking nonsense into his phone about the organization and mad plots and protecting her. He pulls out his usual act when he doesn't know what to do. He covers for his own inability to address a new situation he knows nothing about by speaking about the organization and their plots. But this time it's really only as an excuse to make himself care in a more genuine way, not just to blindly get through the interaction. And he follows it up with a tender moment once the ice is broken. By saying that the mission he's now tasked with is to protect her, he's giving himself a reason to be around her, to get to know her, to truly and genuinely care about her. He's using the excuse as an actual good excuse. That's what it should be, a momentary thing, a barrier breaker, used as a tool to get closer, but not past the point where it can introduce that unforeseen danger. Once it's served its purpose, it can't take over. Those things, those important ones, they can only be taken on in full without shortcuts, even if the shortcut is the introduction. The answer wasn't that Kyouma was wrong, just that he was wrong sometimes. Without Kyouma, Okabe would just be a lonely man sitting in an empty apartment. But because of Kyouma, he now gets to watch his lab fill up to the brim with new members who fill each other's hearts. It was a long journey to find that balance, but he did. And so he ends it with what he's learned. He goes from talking to no one on his phone about mad plots to handing Kurisu a pin just like the others, sharing a soft look. It takes it from mad scientist to caring friend now that the excuse served its purpose of breaking the ice. This time they'll have the basis to love without going through such desperation. All his friends will be able to find what they were lacking in this world and sought in a different one from when he's no longer always faking it. That's the trick, summarized in an old statement that every single person watching this knows with just 2 extra words. Fake it, but only until you make it. And that will wrap things up for this one. This certainly isn't our first look at Steins Gate. This is sort of like a much more expanded and somewhat tangential offshoot of some videos I made years ago discussing just Okabe as a character. And I think there are definitely other ways, other ways to interpret his character, but also other aspects of his character in the Kyouma act, like focusing more on himself and kind of overcoming social anxiety. That I discussed previously and other people have talked about, and I think all that stuff is valid and pairs together with this to really make Steins Gate so great like it is. It has its issues, but rewatching it, I kept it as a 10 out of 10 because, even though I didn't think it would, just because there's so much in Okabe. I could probably make 5 videos like this, just discussing the Kyouma act, each one with different interlock takes, and that's something very special about this show. There's definitely other valid points to this. I just couldn't put them in here today because this would have ended up being a 20-page script, and I didn't want to take up that much time. Also, if you've been around for a while, you're probably noticing that things look a bit different, and I'm very excited about that because I have a much better setup now. This nice camera and a different desk to fit a new tripod and the camera and things, and it's super exciting. Between every section of script, I was geeking out going, this is so cool, because I have like a full awesome setup now, and it's just one of those things that's very validating to know that I've come to the point where I can do that now and I can justify it, and it's such a special thing that I want to thank you for, because you're all who made this possible, that I get to do something I find so endlessly cool just like almost every day now, and that's so fantastic. But anyway, I'll just stop rambling there and say that a big thank you to everyone for watching. There's some more videos on screen, and huge thanks to my patrons who support me and really helped me get to this stage here. I appreciate them particularly, but everyone alike, for just spending some time with me here today. So anyway, thank you everyone for watching, and I hope I'll see you again soon.